The story begins in a quiet room long after the world thinks the boy who lived has been safely placed into the hands of caring relatives. The truth, of course, is that the plan looks tidy only on parchment. Up close, it is about as clean as Filch's mop bucket on a rainy day. Severus Snape stands in front of Albus Dumbledore with the look of a man who has run out of excuses and is now negotiating with destiny itself. He wants nothing to do with raising anyone's child, least of all the son of the man he despised and the woman he loved. Yet life has a talent for assigning homework that no one signed up for, and this is one of those assignments. Dumbledore lays out the situation in his usual calm manner, as though discussing the weather rather than the fate of a small human who already has a reputation. Snape listens, arms folded so tightly he might snap his sleeves, and says very little. He does not yell, he does not storm out. That alone is a sign that something is shifting. He is not agreeing, not yet. He is simply out of breath to refuse. Guilt has its own gravitational field, and tonight it is pulling him in. Snape knows what the Dursleys are like. He knows it the way a teacher knows when a student is lying about why the homework was mysteriously eaten by a theoretical creature no one has seen. There are bruises you don't need to see to know they exist. So when Dumbledore finally stops talking, Snape closes his eyes, counts to 10 in a way that would later become familiar to Harry, and says the quietest, least enthusiastic "fine" in wizarding history. Harry is placed into Snape's guardianship, not with grand ceremony, but with the awkwardness of two people who are equally unsure whether this is a rescue mission or the start of a lifelong headache. Spinner's End becomes the stage for the childhood Harry never had, a place where cracked bricks, narrow windows, and shelves of potion ingredients create an atmosphere that is equal parts gothic novel and aggressively practical bachelor life. Harry arrives not with confidence, not with excitement, but with that small, careful silence children develop when they have spent too long trying not to inconvenience grown-ups. Snape takes one look at it and recognizes something he has spent a lifetime pretending not to remember: the way a child shrinks to fit the space made for them, no matter how tiny that space is. The adjustment is not smooth. Snape's idea of dinner is tea, toast, and the faint hope that the child will fall asleep early. Harry's idea of dinner is whatever doesn't require outrunning Dudley. Yet structure begins to form slowly, the way potions take shape before the first stir. Snape insists on bedtime. Harry obeys. Snape demands quiet. Harry delivers it. Snape expects discipline. Harry understands discipline better than most adults. It is only when Harry reaches for a book on a high shelf, standing slightly on tiptoe, as though still waiting to be scolded, that Snape realizes something unsettling. This child is afraid of taking up space. So he moves the books down, not with commentary, not with sentiment, just a quiet rearranging that says, "You're allowed to learn here." From there, the peculiar rhythm of their early life begins. Snape wakes early to prepare potion ingredients. Harry pads quietly behind him, watching the edges of the cauldron like it's a doorway to a more interesting world. Snape pretends not to notice. Harry pretends not to get in the way. The truth is they are both lonely, but loneliness has rules, especially for Snape. Attachment theory would have a field day here. A child exposed to unpredictable affection clings tightly to any consistent presence. Snape is consistent, even if the emotional warmth he offers is measured in millimeters. Harry, receiving even that, begins to unfold like a plant finally given water. And Snape, who has spent years building walls that could impress even the most paranoid architect, finds cracks forming in places he didn't expect. One of those cracks appears the first time Harry calls him Sir 3 times in the same sentence. Snape, trying to correct a potion mixture, mutters, "You may simply say it once." Harry nods quickly, too quickly. Snape pauses. That speed, that instinct, that is something he remembers all too well from his own childhood. So he adds, in a tone that feels foreign in his own mouth, "You are not in trouble." Harry looks confused. Snape looks more confused. Somewhere, the universe gains a tiny achievement badge titled Emotional Progress Level 1. Life at Spinner's End settles into a strange, functional pattern that neither of them expected, but both of them adapt to with quiet determination. Snape enforces routines with the precision of someone who organizes every potion ingredient alphabetically and then double-checks it just in case. Harry, meanwhile, follows those routines with the grateful eagerness of a child who finally understands what safety feels like, even if that safety smells faintly of asphodel and damp stone. Snape learns quickly that raising a child requires skills not covered in his Hogwarts curriculum. For example, toddlers have a remarkable ability to locate danger within seconds of entering a room. Harry treats Snape's workbench like an obstacle course designed exclusively for him, prompting Snape to issue bans, warnings, counter-warnings, and eventually the kind of silence that means, "I am rethinking every decision I've ever made." Still, the house becomes a home through small, accidental miracles. Harry starts asking questions, and Snape, despite every instinct telling him to redirect the conversation, answers them. Not all of them, of course. Some questions are too heavy, some belong to ghosts. But Harry learns quickly that this adult doesn't mock curiosity, he respects it. That alone reshapes him. Studies on early childhood development note that consistent, controlled environments reduce impulsive risk-taking in adolescence. Harry, growing up with a guardian who notices everything, becomes different. Not less brave, but more thoughtful. Not less mischievous, but more strategic. He grows up hearing phrases like, "If you are going to experiment, at least write down your variables," and "recklessness is not a substitute for intelligence." Snape, in return, receives lessons he never asked for. He learns that Harry laughs at terrible jokes, that he frowns in deep concentration when reading, that he occasionally hugs objects he likes, such as books, which Snape pretends not to notice because acknowledging affection is dangerously close to encouraging it. And yet, despite all efforts to maintain emotional distance, Snape finds himself absorbing Harry's presence the way old houses absorb warmth. One night, Harry pads into the sitting room carrying a blanket, curls up in the armchair across from Snape, and falls asleep mid-sentence. Snape freezes. A full minute passes before he gently levitates the blanket back onto the child. No commentary, no lecture, just the quiet admission that caring has already begun. The years pass with unexpected softness and the occasional explosion, some literal, some emotional. Harry becomes exceptionally good at identifying ingredients by smell, a skill Snape respects even if he would never say so out loud. He begins reading advanced magical theory earlier than most children, and Snape, unable to resist intellectual temptation, corrects his misunderstandings with the same dry tone he uses on first years. Except Harry doesn't shrink from his corrections. He leans into them. This is when the real shift begins. For the first time in his life, Snape is mentoring someone who wants to understand him. The night before Harry turns 11, an owl arrives with a letter that changes everything. Snape knows its contents before Harry opens it. He has been preparing himself for years, but preparation is not the same as readiness. Hogwarts will bring complications, old colleagues, old grudges, old expectations. And, of course, the sorting. The hat may place Harry anywhere, but Snape's influence has already woven itself into Harry's identity. The letter lies open on the table when Snape finally speaks. "Your supplies will be obtained this weekend. Do not attempt to bring every book you own." Harry squints at him. "But what if I need them?" Snape exhales a breath so deep it might qualify as an emotional confession. "You will have access to the Hogwarts library. That is sufficient." Harry nods, but the way he does it, the comfort, the trust, is not lost on Snape. For years, he has provided structure, and now Harry stands anchored by it. The trip to Diagon Alley surprises them both. Harry clings to Snape's presence not out of fear, but out of familiarity. Snape moves through crowds with the determination of a man who would hex anyone who dares bump into the child walking beside him. A few shopkeepers blink at the pair of them, but Snape ignores every stare with professional efficiency. The wand chooses Harry, and the moment is quieter than expected. Harry holds it reverently. Snape watches with an expression a normal person might mistake for disapproval, but Harry has learned enough to read between the silences.
Hogwarts looms ahead. The platform, the train, the castle, all of it buzzes with possibility and danger. Snape, aware of both, delivers a set of rules so strict they could qualify as terms of service. Do not duel anyone. Do not let anyone pressure you into foolishness. Do not attempt unauthorized magic. Do not— Harry interrupts.
I'll be careful, I promise. Snape swallows the instinct to correct him. It would not change anything. Promises are fragile, but this one feels sincere. The train whistles. Harry steps aboard. For a moment, Snape considers saying something meaningful, something fatherly, something human. Instead, he gives a curt nod. Harry beams anyway. At Hogwarts, the Sorting Hat receives more attitude than it bargained for. It meets a Harry who has discipline, analytical habits, a strangely advanced vocabulary for his age, and a complete lack of fear toward Slytherin. You would do well there, the Hat murmurs. Harry considers it. Actually considers it. This alone startles the Hat. The decision takes longer than canon, but the outcome? That must wait for the next chapter. What matters now is this. The boy entering Hogwarts is not the boy from the cupboard. He is a child shaped by care he didn't expect and a guardian who never thought he was capable of giving it. And the world, Hogwarts included, is not ready for the result. The Sorting Hat hesitates in a way that is rare for ancient magical objects, especially ones that pride themselves on snap judgments and theatrical flair. Harry sits still beneath its brim, not fidgeting, not panicking, just thinking. That alone is unusual. Most first years treat the ceremony like an existential crisis wrapped in wool. But this Harry has been raised under the tutelage of a man who demands thought before action. He has learned to pause, to consider, to weigh consequences. The Hat hums with interest. It sees bravery, yes, but also caution. Curiosity tempered by discipline. Intellect sharpened not by arrogance, but by survival. And beneath it all, something the Hat hasn't seen in a Potter for decades, ambivalence. Harry is not desperate to prove himself. He is not eager for a house that will give him an identity. He simply wants a place where he belongs. Slytherin would suit you, the Hat offers slyly. You've been raised differently. You understand cunning, strategy. But would the house want me? Harry asks quietly, surprising the Hat so much it nearly slips over his eyes. He isn't afraid. He isn't anxious. He's simply wondering whether his upbringing under Snape makes him a good fit or an outlier. The Hat takes its time. It weighs Harry's empathy, his sense of fairness, the loyalty that anchors every choice he makes. Finally, it settles on the path that allows growth without forcing identity. The decision rings through the hall, and the school stares as Harry joins a house they expected to be divided over him. Some students whisper, some blink. Draco Malfoy looks like someone just handed him a puzzle missing the front picture. Snape's expression is unreadable. Of course it is. But the slight lift of his chin is unmistakable. It is pride, deeply repressed, heavily disguised pride, but pride all the same. The result reshapes Hogwarts dynamics instantly. Harry enters Slytherin as a curiosity rather than an enemy. He greets Draco with polite neutrality, which confuses the boys so thoroughly that he spends their first conversation trying to determine whether Harry is quietly mocking him. Within days, the Slytherin dormitory becomes a physical and social maze Harry must learn to navigate. Pure-blood politics swirl around him like potion fumes. But Harry has an advantage no other student has, a guardian who understands this environment intimately. Snape doesn't coddle him. Instead, he arms him with knowledge. Who to avoid, who to trust cautiously, who to treat with impeccable politeness. Snape has spent his life studying social hierarchies like dangerous magical creatures, and now he reluctantly passes that expertise on. Harry adjusts, he listens, he learns. Children reflect their environments, and Harry, having grown up in Spinner's End, has become comfortable with shadows, quiet rooms, and thinking before speaking. He does not compete for attention. He does not brag. He does not overextend himself to impress others. In Slytherin, that earns him a strange kind of respect. Meanwhile, Snape faces a new challenge. maintaining professional distance when half the staff expects him to show blatant favoritism. He does not. If anything, Harry receives stricter scrutiny than every other student combined. Snape assigns him essays with the ferocity of someone trying to win a competition that no one else is aware of. In class, Snape treats him with near-military discipline. No softening, no hints, no smiles. Just the relentless expectation that Harry will be better today than he was yesterday. And Harry, confusingly, thrives on it. Because home has taught him discipline is safety, structure is stability, predictability is comfort. Outside of class, the faculty quietly recatalogs their assumptions. Minerva watches Harry during lessons with a narrowed gaze that says, "He's polite. Why is he polite? Who trained him?" Hagrid gives him warm smiles and large baked goods, which Harry gratefully accepts but then stores in Tupperware, a habit he may or might have learned from Snape after the man warned him about leaving crumbs near volatile potion ingredients. The school year unfolds differently from canon. Without the desperate hunger for belonging that once flung him headfirst into adventure, Harry takes more measured steps. Curiosity remains. This is Harry Potter after all. But he now approaches mysteries like a strategist rather than a reckless hero. When he notices something odd about Quirrell, he doesn't rush into corridors after midnight. He writes notes. He observes. He asks subtle questions that Quirrell fails to answer convincingly. And then, in a move no one could have predicted, he discusses his concerns with Snape. Not dramatically, not fearfully, just quietly, as one brings home a particularly complicated homework question. Snape listens without interrupting. That alone shocks Harry. In this timeline, their communication has evolved into a system built on cautious honesty. Finally, Snape says, "You will not engage in any investigation. Am I clear?" Harry nods. Snape adds, "However, your observations are noted." This is Snape's version of, "You did well." Harry beams for the rest of the week. Draco notices and tries to determine which assignment he aced without realizing it. As the year progresses, Harry's sense of self becomes woven into two identities, the reserved but thoughtful Slytherin first year, and the child shaped by one very complicated professor whose awkward attempts at parenting somehow created a sense of home. The Philosopher's Stone arc changes dramatically. Harry does not break dozens of school rules. He does not sprint past teachers. He does not believe himself the only one capable of stopping danger. Instead, he consults Snape again, this time with more details. Snape, already aware of the stone's presence and the protection surrounding it, finds his irritation mixing with something far more dangerous: trust. Not trust in Harry's judgment to solve the crisis, but trust in Harry to tell him the truth. That alone shifts the outcome. The forbidden third-floor corridor never sees Harry's footsteps. The traps remain untouched. The confrontation changes hands entirely. Instead of a child facing horrors in the dark, an experienced adult steps in. Harry remains at Hogwarts, frustrated but obedient, sitting with a book open and nerves tangled, while Snape engages in a silent war beneath the castle. When Snape returns, alive, exhausted, victorious in ways he will never detail, the argument they nearly have dissolves when Harry mutters, "I didn't want you to go alone." Snape blinks. Emotional vulnerability is not his preferred potion ingredient, but he nods, once, and Harry accepts that tiny gesture as the reassurance it is meant to be. Their bond strengthens. Childhood is shaped by moments like these, the quiet confessions, the small acts of mutual care, the shared understanding that fear and responsibility often walk together. By the end of first year, something irrevocable has happened. Harry no longer thinks of Spinner's End as a temporary refuge. He thinks of it as home. And Snape, though he would sooner duel a troll than admit it, thinks of Harry less as a duty and more as the one person who has forced him to become something better than he once believed possible. Their story, however, is only beginning. Second year arrives with the subtlety of a bludger aimed at someone's kneecaps. Harry returns to Hogwarts taller, sharper, and noticeably more self-assured, traits that startle multiple professors who are expecting the same shy boy from his first sorting feast. What they get instead is a child who has grown up in an environment where every action has a reason and every mistake has a lesson attached. Living with Snape has given Harry two essential skills: the ability to think before acting and the ability to recognize when adults are hiding something. Both will matter far more this year than either of them expects. Their summer had been quiet, at least by Potter-Snape standards. Spinner's End becomes less an industrial relic and more a space rearranged for two people instead of one. Harry adds small things that make the house feel lived in: a plant by the window, a blanket permanently draped over the sitting room chair, mismatched mugs Snape tolerates because they are functional enough. Snape in turn begins introducing Harry to more complex potions theory. Not hands-on brewing at first, just theory. The kind of theory that requires diagrams and careful reasoning and a patience Harry didn't know he possessed until Snape forced him to discover it. Their days fall into a rhythm: morning tea, reading, potion philosophy disguised as casual conversation, and the occasional sarcastic commentary from Snape when Harry proposes a solution that ignores basic safety. Neither acknowledges how much they enjoy these routines, but it is obvious in their silences. The good kind, the steady kind, the kind that only exists when people feel safe. Returning to Hogwarts, Harry walks into the Great Hall a little differently now. He is still quiet, still observant, but the hesitancy in his movements has faded. Slytherin greets him as one of their own. Even Draco, whose attempts at superiority have softened into something resembling genuine friendship, gives him a nod that would make Lucius wonder what on earth happened to his son. Classes resume, and with them comes an interesting shift. Harry has grown academically. Snape's influence has reshaped the way he processes information. He notices patterns sooner. He questions inconsistencies more boldly. He writes essays with the dry, precise tone that McGonagall reads twice before muttering, "That's Snape's influence, all right." But the calm does not last. A whisper circulates through Hogwarts. A whisper that turns into rumors, and rumors become fear. The Chamber of Secrets. The words themselves feel heavy, as though they carry a memory older than any student in the school. Harry hears the whispers and does what Snape has trained him to do: observe, do not panic, and, for the love of all things magical, do not try to be a hero. In another timeline, he might have run headfirst into danger out of instinct or desperation for belonging. But this Harry has a home. He has stability. He has a guardian who has drilled into him that survival is not a matter of luck, but of strategy. So when he hears the first rumors, Harry doesn't investigate hallways alone or confide in whoever happens to be standing nearby. He goes straight to Snape. Snape listens with the kind of tension reserved for catastrophic news and Potter-related chaos. But instead of berating him, he asks, "What precisely did you observe?" Harry outlines everything, factually, including things he overheard, behaviors he noticed, the timing of certain events. Snape processes the information faster than most people breathe. He does not dismiss Harry. He does not accuse him. He simply acknowledges reality. Something dangerous is happening within Hogwarts walls. This difference, this trust, changes everything. Harry still hears voices. Yes, magic is magic after all. But instead of internalizing terror, he treats it as a data point. At night, he sits beside the fire in the Slytherin common room, flipping through books on magical architecture and linguistics, trying to understand what creature could speak without breath. Draco grows curious. "Potter, are you studying for fun?" Harry nods. Draco stares. "Are you sick?" The school year spirals into fear. Students shrink away from shadows. Professors double patrols. Lockhart continues being Lockhart, which is a separate crisis entirely. But through it all, Harry remains unusually grounded. Snape has taught him what fear looks like when examined logically. Fear is not the enemy. Ignorance is. That understanding keeps Harry calm even when students begin turning up petrified.
He feels responsible, not because he thinks the world expects him to save it, but because Snape has raised him to pay attention to danger, not run from it. Eventually, Harry's observations push the truth out of hiding. He pieces together clues Snape subtly encourages without outright revealing details. When Harry brings him a carefully written summary of everything he knows, complete with margins labeled and evidence catalog,
Snape reads the report twice, the second time slower. This is not the child he expected to raise. This is someone becoming frighteningly intelligent and brave in the quietest, most deliberate way. Snape does what he must. He alerts the appropriate people without revealing Harry's involvement. This time, Harry does not face basilisks or deadly chambers. Adults do, competent adults. Harry remains in the safe confines of the castle, pacing the common room until news arrives that the threat has been neutralized. When Snape returns that night, dusty, irritated, wearing the expression of someone who has fought something entirely too large, Harry nearly starts scolding him. The words, "You could have died," nearly escape his mouth, but Snape raises a hand. We will not be discussing this now. Harry, wiser than he once was, hears what Snape is actually saying. "I'm alive. Stop worrying." Their argument dissolves before it begins. The aftermath binds them even more tightly. Harry learns that responsibility does not always mean carrying the weight alone. Snape learns that protecting Harry has become something deeper than duty, something closer to instinct, something dangerously close to love. By the end of second year, Harry sits on the edge of his bed at Spinner's End and realizes something simple. He never thinks of himself as alone anymore, not ever. And that is perhaps the greatest magic this alternate timeline has created. Third year arrives wrapped in the usual Hogwarts anticipation, but this time the world beyond the castle walls feels heavier. News circulates about Sirius Black, escaped prisoner, alleged murderer, dangerous beyond measure. Students whisper dramatically in corridors. Some claim he can turn into mist. Others insist he's already inside the castle, disguising himself as a tapestry. The truth, as always, is complicated. But for Harry, this year begins not with fear, but with confusion. The prophet headlines mention his name far too often for comfort. And Snape? Snape reacts with an intensity usually reserved for catastrophic potion accidents. Spinner's End becomes a fortress of caution. Snape watches the windows too long. He double-checks wards. He triple-checks them. Harry senses something deeper brewing beneath his guardian's usual controlled demeanor. Fear, perhaps? Anger? Memories? But Snape does not explain. Not yet. Their summer had been quieter than the last ones, but not easier. Harry had grown taller again, sharper again, his mind expanding faster than either of them expected. Snape notices the change first. Harry has begun analyzing people the way he analyzes potions. Their dynamics, their patterns, the motives they think they're hiding. Harry sees more now, understands more. And Snape, despite countless internal objections, begins teaching him defense theory. Slowly, carefully, with the same precision he uses when handling volatile ingredients. Not wand work, not yet, just theory. Harry absorbs it all. By the time they return to Hogwarts, Harry carries himself with a quiet confidence that surprises even Slytherin. Draco actually blinks at him on the train and asks, "Did you grow, or are you standing on something?" Harry rolls his eyes, politely of course. But the calm of returning to school evaporates quickly. The guards stationed around the castle, Dementors, cast an oppressive cold that seeps into the bones of every student. Harry feels their presence more intensely than others. Trauma has a way of lighting up when darkness presses against it. Snape notices immediately. Harry freezes near one of the creatures during the feast, his breath catching. The hall buzzes. Snape moves so quickly that half the staff thinks he's about to hex someone. Instead, he places a steady arm near Harry's shoulder, not touching, but close enough to anchor him back into reality. Dementors feed on pain, Snape explains later. Harry, who has spent years healing but still carries scars, feels the pull like a hook beneath the ribs. This becomes the first time Snape teaches him something openly protective, a shield rooted in emotional regulation. It is not a Patronus lesson. It is the precursor. He teaches Harry to ground himself, to breathe, to separate memory from sensation. Harry practices quietly in their shared living space at Hogwarts. Slow breaths, centered thought, anchors, stability. These are not spells, but they are magic of a different kind. Meanwhile, the castle simmers with tension. Sirius Black is the shadow beneath every conversation. Students assume he is hunting Harry. Harry, raised with Snape's methodical reasoning, begins to question that narrative. Why escape now? Why target him? Why leave clues so obvious? Snape, when Harry brings these questions forward, reacts with something between frustration and wary approval. He does not confirm anything. He does not deny anything. Instead, he says, "You will focus on your studies. Leave adults to deal with adult matters." Which, to Harry's credit, he mostly does. Mostly. But when someone is raised by Severus Snape, leaving things alone still means noticing patterns. And Harry notices plenty. He notices how Lupin watches him with quiet familiarity. He notices how his guardian stiffens whenever Sirius's name or Lupin's is mentioned. He notices the carefulness in the way certain staff members choose their words. And so, third year becomes the year Harry begins to understand that adults have histories, messy, tangled histories, and those histories shape the present. He becomes a student not just of magic, but of human behavior. Snape, meanwhile, tries to keep emotional distance, but fails spectacularly whenever Harry is in danger. The first Quidditch match ends with a swarm of Dementors, and Harry collapses mid-air. Snape reaches him in record time, his expression the kind Hogwarts students will reference for years without ever understanding it. Harry wakes in the hospital wing. Snape sits rigidly at his bedside, pretending he has been grading essays. He has not. And Harry, half asleep, whispers, "I'm fine." Snape replies, "You are not permitted to fall from heights exceeding 20 feet. Harry replies, "I didn't plan it," before drifting back to sleep. The conversation is absurd, but the emotion behind it is not. As the year unravels, secrets edge their way into the open. Harry learns the truth about Sirius, slowly, cautiously, through fragments and overheard comments and
together logic Snape never intended him to use so effectively. And when the truth finally crystallizes that Sirius was not the traitor, the shift inside Harry is enormous. Everything he thought he knew about his parents, their friends, their legacy, fractures. Snape reacts with explosive bitterness when the truth comes out, not because he wishes it false, but because it drags old wounds to the surface with sharp edges. Yet even with the weight of history crushing them, Snape and Harry navigate the chaos together. When the confrontation with Sirius finally occurs, Harry is not alone. He does not rush blindly, he does not scream accusations. He stands between Sirius and Snape, trembling but composed, saying words he never thought he would hear himself say. "Stop, all of you, just stop." And for a moment, that single fragile moment, both men freeze. Because Harry is no longer a child caught between adult battles. He is a mediator, a bridge, a reminder of everything they lost and everything they might still protect. The night ends differently than canon. No time travel, no Buckbeak rescue mission, no frantic attempts to rewrite fate. Instead, several adults who should have had this conversation years ago finally have it. Harry doesn't say much. He doesn't need to. Snape's hand on his shoulder is steady, grounding him long after Sirius disappears into the forest under questionable circumstances. And afterward, Snape says quietly, almost reluctantly, "You showed restraint. That is commendable." Harry hears what Snape means. "I was terrified of losing you." They don't say anything else. Nothing more is needed. By the end of third year, Harry understands something profound. Love does not always look soft. Sometimes it looks like a man who distrusts the world but protects you from it anyway. And Snape understands something equally heavy. Raising Harry has changed him more than he ever expected, in ways he cannot undo and no longer wants to.
Fourth year begins not with dread, but with a strange sense of normalcy. Harry has grown into someone the wizarding world is still trying to categorize. A Potter who is polite, observant, openly studious, and, most disorienting of all, a Slytherin who causes fewer disciplinary records than the average Hufflepuff. Naturally, this means disaster is imminent. It arrives in the form of the Triwizard Tournament. Hogwarts buzzes with excitement as foreign students arrive, bringing new traditions, new magic, and a level of dramatic flair that even Dumbledore seems mildly impressed by. Harry watches from the sidelines, content to avoid the center of attention. Being raised by Snape has taught him the value of subtlety and the peace of anonymity, two concepts that his canon self never had the luxury of learning. Snape is visibly relieved that Harry is too young to participate. Relieved in a way that involves fewer headaches, fewer hospital wing visits, and fewer existential terrors. Or so he thinks. The night Harry's name emerges from the Goblet of Fire, the world tilts. The Great Hall goes quiet in the way dangerous creatures go quiet before striking. Students swivel to stare at him. Professors exchange alarmed glances. Snape's expression becomes a masterclass in emotional suppression, but his eyes are burning with one very specific message: absolutely not. Harry shares that sentiment. In fact, when his name echoes through the hall, his first instinct is to stand up and declare there has been a mistake. His second instinct is to sit back down. His third is to look at Snape. Snape rises from the staff table with a calm that could fool no one who has spent more than 2 minutes around him. He does not shout, he does not argue. He simply walks to the antechamber with the kind of cold authority that makes grown wizards rethink their life choices. Harry follows. Students whisper behind him. Some assume he cheated. Some assume Snape cheated for him. The ones who know him snort at the idea. Snape would rather swallow a cauldron of doxy venom than help anyone cheat at anything. Behind the closed door, Snape does not say, "How could this happen?" He says, "Explain everything you know. Now." Harry explains. Snape listens. He trusts Harry enough to know he would never enter the tournament willingly, and Harry trusts Snape to protect him. But protection now means something different. Harry is not a helpless child anymore. He is capable, trained, intelligent. Snape must allow him to act, but guide him from the shadows. This is perhaps the most difficult challenge he has faced. Far more difficult than battling Death Eaters, grading essays, or explaining basic safety to students who think Wingardium Leviosa is a substitute for common sense. The first task looms ahead, and Harry is thrust into preparations that would terrify even experienced adults. Snape approaches the situation ruthlessly. Not cruelly, ruthlessly. You will study past tournaments. You will analyze patterns. You will prepare escape routes. You will not engage recklessly, and you will inform me of every detail. Harry follows these instructions almost to the letter. Almost, because the detail about dragons slips through the cracks. When Hagrid reveals the dragons, Harry panics for approximately 12 seconds before Snape's voice invades his mind like a second conscience. Breathe, observe, respond logically. He does. He studies the terrain, he studies the dragon, he crafts a plan based on evasion rather than bravado. And when the moment comes, he survives not with flashy heroics, but with strategy and precision. Traits Snape drilled into him so consistently that they have become instinct. The wizarding world is impressed. Slytherin is impressed. Draco is impressed, but tries to hide it by criticizing Harry's broom handling. Snape says nothing afterward, except adequate. Harry recognizes this as the highest compliment available in the Snape emotional vocabulary. The second task forces Harry to confront something more personal: what or whom he would miss the most. In canon, the answer was obvious. Here, it is devastating. Snape does not volunteer to be his hostage, the tournament officials choose. Harry nearly refuses to participate upon learning this. "You can't be the one taken," he argues. Snape crosses his arms. "I assure you I am capable of holding my breath underwater." Harry gives him a look that communicates quite clearly that this is not the point. The task proceeds. Harry succeeds not with desperation, but with composure.
He understands that panic is the enemy of clarity, and clarity is what Snape has given him his entire life. When Snape emerges from the lake, soaked, annoyed, and alive, he mutters, "We will not speak of this again." Harry rolls his eyes with affection. The third task brings everything to a breaking point. The maze is dangerous, unpredictable, and entirely too quiet. Harry walks its twisting paths with the caution of someone who has
learned that the universe does not hand out blessings without attaching strings. Inside the maze, he notices subtle clues, patterns Snape trained him to see, indicating that something is terribly wrong. He is not wrong. When the portkey transports him to the graveyard, Snape is not there to catch him. His upbringing, however, is. Harry's survival comes not from instinctive bravery, but from foresight, discipline, and the grounded emotional regulations Snape taught him. He does not freeze. He does not shatter. He holds himself together long enough to escape, long enough to return with truth scorched behind his eyes. The aftermath is brutal. Chaos erupts. Accusations fly. Harry ends up in the hospital wing not from physical injury, but from shock. Snape arrives within minutes. He stands stiffly by Harry's bedside, gripping the railings so tightly his knuckles pale. When Harry opens his eyes, Snape says, "You return from the dead far too often." Harry whispers, "I learned from you." Snape swallows whatever emotion threatens to rise and replies, "Then I clearly need to teach you better habits." But he does not leave Harry's side. Not that night, not the next. Fourth year ends on a knife's edge. Harry has lived, but not unscarred. Snape has protected him, but not unchanged. And the wizarding world has shifted toward war. Yet amid all this darkness, something else has solidified. The bond between them is no longer fragile, accidental, or unspoken. It is family. Complicated, imperfect, fiercely loyal family. And in the battles ahead, that may be the one thing that saves them both. Fifth year arrives with a tension so thick it could be bottled, labeled, and stored in Snape's private ingredients cabinet under volatile, handle with extreme caution. The wizarding world is fracturing. Rumors twist into political weapons. The Ministry begins treating truth like an optional elective only a few people signed up for. And in the middle of it all stands Harry, older now, quieter, his gaze carrying the weight of someone who has already seen death up close and understands its shape. Snape senses the shift in him immediately. Trauma changes posture. It changes silence. It changes the rhythm of breathing. Snape may not be fluent in open affection, but he is fluent in damage. He adjusts his approach without announcing it. Harry receives more structured training, more grounding exercises, more academic rigor disguised as routine. Snape cannot stop the world from unraveling, but he can prepare Harry for its impact. Hogwarts, however, becomes a battleground of a different kind when Dolores Umbridge arrives. Her smile is the sort that sends even the castle ghosts drifting in the opposite direction. Her rules expand faster than Filch can nail them to the walls. Her pink aesthetic clashes violently with Hogwarts' stone interior, making some students theorize she might be a magical parasite that thrives on bureaucracy and the color blush. But the real threat lies in her authority and the way she wields it with syrupy malice. Harry, raised with Snape's skepticism, recognizes immediately that Umbridge is not simply annoying. She is dangerous. She enforces obedience without understanding. She rewards silence. She punishes truth. Everything Snape has taught Harry stands in direct contrast to her worldview. Harry becomes uncomfortable, not because he fears her, but because she represents a corruption of the very principles Hogwarts once stood for. When she bans practical defensive magic, the student body erupts. Gryffindors roar. Ravenclaws plot. Hufflepuffs quietly seethe. Slytherins evaluate the power dynamics with raised eyebrows. Harry, however, does something unexpected. He begins teaching. Not because he wants fame, not because he wants rebellion, but because Snape has taught him that knowledge is armor. and denying students that armor is a form of violence. The clandestine defense group forms under his guidance. He teaches not as a hero, but as a strategist. Do not rely on spontaneity, he tells them. It is unreliable. Prepare, analyze, predict, respond. Some students blink at him, surprised at how methodical he is. Hermione beams. Ron looks mildly betrayed that Harry has been keeping smart thoughts hidden this whole time. Draco, overhearing rumors, quietly investigates and eventually joins, not the group, but Snape's private circle of concern. Snape notices Harry's exhaustion. He notices his quickened breathing. He notices how Harry's trauma resurfaces whenever Dementors are mentioned. Snape responds in the only way he knows how, by intensifying Harry's training. This becomes the year Harry learns the Patronus, not through joy, but through discipline. Not through memories of happiness, but through memories of safety. Nights at Spinner's End, Snape's dry voice saying, "You are capable of more than this." When Harry finally casts a silver shape that bursts from his wand like living light, Snape remains silent for a long moment. Then, acceptable. Harry laughs. The fight with Umbridge escalates until the rebellion is no longer whispers but open resistance. Harry becomes a symbol, not because he asks to be, but because he carries himself with a strange combination of humility and strategic calm. The Ministry, threatened by what it does not understand, retaliates. Harry learns quickly that truth can be powerless in the wrong political climate. Snape, to Harry's surprise, supports him more openly than ever. He never breaks his facade, never exposes himself to Ministry retaliation, but he defends Harry in the shadows, correcting misinformation, intercepting threats, ensuring no student emboldened by Umbridge targets Harry without consequence. When the vision of Sirius comes, planted, manipulated, crafted to lure him, the difference in this timeline manifests powerfully. Harry does not run blindly. He does not assume he must save the world alone. He brings the information to Snape immediately. Snape's reaction is volcanic, but controlled. "You will not go," he states. "It is a trap." Harry argues, but Snape holds the line. "Think," he insists. "Use what you know. You believe Sirius is in danger. Why?" Harry explains the vision. Snape dismantles its inconsistencies one by one. They analyze it together, like detectives, not pawns. And when they determine that Voldemort is manipulating Harry, the entire outcome of the year changes. The students do not break into the Ministry. Harry does not duel Death Eaters. Sirius does not fall through the veil. Instead, Snape alerts the right allies, quietly, strategically, with enough precision that the trap collapses before it can fully spring. Voldemort flees, denied the spectacle he hoped for. The Ministry's lies unravel. The truth forces itself into public consciousness. And Harry returns to Hogwarts shaken but alive, carrying not the grief of loss, but the lingering ache of what could have happened. Snape realizes something that night as he watches Harry sleep in the infirmary. The boy no longer needs constant protection. He needs partnership, guidance, space to grow. Fifth year ends with war looming on the horizon, but with something stronger than fear holding them steady. Trust built through years of honesty, discipline, and unconditional presence. And for the first time in a long time, Harry believes he is ready for what comes next, because he will not face it alone. Sixth year begins with a quiet dread humming beneath the surface of the wizarding world. Not loud, not chaotic, just a low, persistent vibration that settles in bones and windowsills like distant thunder. Hogwarts feels different now, older somehow, as though the castle itself is bracing for what everyone knows is coming. Harry walks through its halls, taller, more mature, carrying the weight of experience and the stability of the upbringing Snape has carved into him piece by careful piece. At Spinner's End that summer, the air had been thick with unspoken tension. Snape received visitors late at night, hooded, tense, careful. Harry didn't interrupt, but he noticed everything. He has grown into someone who reads silence better than words. And Snape's silence in those weeks was full of storm clouds. One evening, Harry broke the pattern. "Are you in danger?" he asked. Snape closed his eyes. It was a simple question, but simple questions often demand complicated truths. "I have responsibilities," Snape replied. It wasn't an answer, and Harry knew it, but he also understood that pushing would break something fragile. Snape had spent years teaching him restraint. Now it was Harry's turn to use it. The unspoken truth between them hung in the air. Snape was playing a role on a knife's edge, navigating allegiances too dangerous to expose. When they returned to Hogwarts, the atmosphere was thick with suspicion. Draco Malfoy walked the halls with the posture of someone carrying secrets too heavy for his age. His eyes darted toward Harry more than usual, not with hostility, but with something closer to panic. Harry noticed. Snape noticed. Everyone noticed. Well, everyone who paid attention. Harry, having been raised to observe patterns before reacting, approached Draco quietly one evening, not as a rival, not as a threat, as someone who recognized the tremor in another person's voice. "You look tired," Harry said simply. Draco flinched as though the words were an accusation. "Mind your own business, Potter." But the crack was there, the fear. Snape met with Draco often that year, speaking in low tones behind closed doors. Those conversations left Snape more drawn, more guarded. Harry, for the first time, saw fear in his guardian's face. Not fear of failure, not fear of punishment, fear of what he might be forced to do. Sixth year becomes the year Harry begins to understand the cost of responsibility, not in a heroic sense, but in the quiet, suffocating way it shapes the soul. Snape grows thinner, his eyes sharpen, his voice becomes even more curt. Students assume he's simply being himself. Harry knows better. War is carving shadows beneath his skin. Meanwhile, Dumbledore begins drawing Harry into private lessons, not for the purpose of molding him into a weapon, but to prepare him for truths that Snape does not have the heart to reveal. Horcruxes, Tom Riddle's past, the shape of Voldemort's fragmented soul. In another timeline, Harry might have approached these lessons with volatility or denial, but being raised by Snape has changed him. He approaches each memory with academic thoroughness, taking notes, asking questions, analyzing patterns. Dumbledore observes him with a quiet wonder. Harry is not the boy he expected. Snape has shaped him into something sharper, steadier, more thoughtful. A strategist, not a pawn. And yet, even with all this preparation, danger bleeds through the cracks. Draco's mission accelerates. The tension following him becomes unbearable. One evening, Harry finds him alone in a deserted hallway, shoulders shaking with suppressed sobs. This is not Draco Malfoy the world imagines. This is a teenager drowning in expectations that could kill him. Harry steps forward gently. "You're not alone." Draco startles. "You don't understand anything." But Harry does. He understands what it means to have the world decide your fate before you can shape it yourself. He understands what it means to be born into a legacy you didn't choose. He answers softly, "You can talk to him, you know." Draco goes still. "You mean Snape?" Harry nods. "He won't let you fall." Draco wants to believe him, but belief is hard when fear becomes a second heartbeat. The year spirals toward its inevitable climax. The night the Dark Mark appears above the astronomy tower, everything fractures. Harry, in this timeline, is not frozen under the influence of a spell. He is hidden, on Snape's orders, behind a protective barrier of shadows, observing, analyzing, heart pounding. Draco stands before Dumbledore, wand trembling. Dumbledore speaks softly, as though soothing a wounded creature. Harry watches Draco's internal war tear him apart. And then Snape arrives. Not with dramatic thunder, not with cinematic villainy, with the face of a man carrying the heaviest burden imaginable. When Dumbledore says, "Severus, please," the world stops. In canon, this moment is a mystery. Here, it becomes a tragedy Harry finally understands. Snape's eyes flickered, Or where Harry is hidden. It is the briefest glance, barely a movement, but it holds years of meaning. Stay there, stay safe, forgive me. And then, with a single motion, he does the unthinkable. The spell cracks through the night like the ending of a story written long before any of them were born. Dumbledore falls. Draco stumbles back in horror. Harry feels something inside him break. Not trust, not love, but the illusion that all stories have clean endings. Yet even then, Snape protects him. He directs Harry's path with split-second precision. A shield here, a silent warning there. His escape is orchestrated not as a flight, but as an act of guardianship. Outside the castle, when Harry finally confronts him, the conversation is different from canon. "You promised you wouldn't leave me," Harry chokes out. Snape's expression shatters for a fraction of a second, the closest thing to heartbreak he has ever allowed to surface. "I am not leaving you," he says, voice low, ragged. "I am ensuring you live long enough to hate me properly." But Harry doesn't hate him. He can't. Even in the grief, the confusion, the rage, he knows Snape's actions were forged from sacrifice, not malice. That night, Harry learns the final lesson Snape never meant to teach him. Love and tragedy are often made of the same threads. Sixth year ends with Harry standing at the edge of war, older than his age should allow, carrying grief and understanding in equal measure. And though Snape is gone from his side, Harry walks forward wearing the strength Snape spent years building in him. He will need it. The darkest chapter is yet to come. Seventh year does not begin with a train ride or a feast or the familiar clang of the Hogwarts gates. It begins with absence, of safety, of structure, of the one person whose guidance has shaped Harry's entire life. The world is folding inward, darkening at the seams. The Ministry has fallen, Hogwarts has been conquered, and Harry is no longer a student. He is a fugitive, carrying a mission too heavy for any 17-year-old to bear. But Harry is not the boy he once was. Snape raised him. That changes everything. The first thing Harry does after the events atop the astronomy tower is stop, think, breathe. It is a skill Snape carved into him through years of repetition. Do not act until you understand the terrain. Do not speak until you understand the motive. Do not fight until you understand the enemy. His grief is sharp, but it does not consume him. Snape taught him that emotions are not weaknesses until they rule your actions. Harry does not know where Snape is. He does not know if Snape is alive, or trapped, or hunted. What he does know is this: Snape's last glance was not one of abandonment. It was instruction. Everything Harry does next is shaped by that moment. He, Hermione, and Ron move through forests, safe houses, abandoned cottages, and Harry leads not with desperation, but with strategy. Hermione notices first. This Harry listens more, speaks less, processes faster. He builds contingency plans the way Snape taught him, mapping outcomes like branching potion reactions. Ron jokes that Harry is starting to sound like a grumpy professor. Harry nearly smiles. Grief and hope coexist in strange ways. In hidden camps while the others sleep, Harry rewrites every memory of Snape's lessons. Defense strategies, emotional regulation, interrogation analysis, silent observation, political reading of enemies. These become the tools of survival. Voldemort moves through the wizarding world like a storm front, but Harry remains a quiet force, studying Horcrux patterns, decoding magical signatures, trusting logic over impulse. The trio still faces danger. They still make mistakes. But Harry's steadiness alters everything. When the locket Horcrux cuts into their morale, Harry recognizes the psychological manipulation immediately. Snape once taught him how dark magic exploits emotional fractures, how fear amplifies internal conflict. Harry forces the group to rest, to reset, to breathe. He speaks with a level voice even when Ron storms away, leaving fractures in the cold silence. Hermione, shaken and exhausted, whispers, "How are you staying so calm?" Harry answers honestly, "He taught me how to survive my own mind." And that is the truth. Snape's lessons were never simply spells or strategies. They were survival mechanisms disguised as discipline. And now, in the middle of an unraveling world, those tools are keeping Harry alive. Months pass. Clues unfold. The trio infiltrates the Ministry with precision instead of chaos. They escape Gringotts not by accident, but through layered planning. Harry begins noticing Voldemort's patterns with frightening accuracy. His intuition sharpens.
His bravery becomes colder, more deliberate, a blade honed rather than swung wildly. And then comes the night when everything shifts. At Shell Cottage, recovering from Malfoy Manor, Harry dreams, and for the first time in months, it is not a nightmare. He sees Snape, not dying, not tortured, standing in a dimly lit room, pacing the way he does when calculating variables. Harry wakes with clarity. Snape is alive, and not merely alive, working, fighting, playing a role so dangerous that even Voldemort cannot see all its edges. This realization does not comfort Harry, it steels him. The idea of Snape deliberately risking his life every day for information, for strategy, for the possibility of Harry's success, it is almost unbearable. But it also means Harry is not completely alone. They are fighting the same war from opposite ends of a labyrinth. When the trio returns to Hogwarts, the castle is a shell of its former self. Carrows patrol halls, students carry bruises, fear clings to the stones like frost. But Harry, raised to see beneath surfaces, notices something else: resistance. Even in darkness, Hogwarts breathes defiance. And beneath that defiance is a current of whispered hope. "He's still here," Neville mutters one night. Snape still had Master. His tone is conflicted, confused, because Snape has ordered punishments, but also shielded students from worse. He has struck deals with shadows. He has played the villain to protect those too naive to understand the cost of open rebellion. Harry says nothing, but inside he understands everything. Snape is still fighting, still protecting, still bleeding for a world that never gave him peace. And then comes the final battle. Chaos erupts through halls where children once learned charms. Harry moves through the war zone with a soldier's clarity, not running into danger head first, but navigating it with
purpose. He searches for one thing: the truth. Snape's truth. Their paths collide in the Shrieking Shack. Death hangs thick in the air. Nagini strikes. Snape falls. But this moment, this horrific, irreversible moment, unfolds differently from the world we know. Harry does not simply kneel beside him. He understands the layers of Snape's sacrifice before a single tear falls. Snape's shaking hand grips his sleeve, a gesture more intimate than words. But instead of whispered bitterness, instead of urgency carved from fear, he says something else, something he has held in for 17 years. "You survived," Snape breathes. "Good." It is not just approval, it is closure. Harry, voice breaking, tries to cast healing spells, but Snape stops him with a faint shake of his head. "No, you must go. You know what you are." Harry nods. He has spent years preparing for the truth, long before Dumbledore ever revealed it. Snape released the world's last secret with the same precision he once used in teaching. And then, just before the end, Snape whispers one last instruction, barely audible: "Finish it." A lifetime of discipline, strategy, sacrifice, love disguised as fury, all of it passes between them in that final breath. And Harry carries it with him as he walks back into war. The battle ends as it was always meant to, with choice, will, sacrifice, courage. Voldemort falls. Dawn rises, and the world shifts again. In the aftermath, when names are spoken, honored, remembered, mourned, Harry writes one more into the list. Not as a villain, not as a misunderstood spy, as the man who raised him, as the parent he never expected, as the reason he survived long enough to save the world. Years later, when peace settles uneasily over Britain, Harry returns to Spinner's End. The house is dustier now, quieter, but still full of echoes. He stands in the doorway and breathes in the faint scent of old books, potion jars, and something like memory. He doesn't say anything. He doesn't have to. Their story is not one of perfection. It is one of healing, of choices, of mistakes that became redemption, of a boy who learned to think before he leaps, and a man who learned to love before it was too late. And though one of them is gone, The life they built together endures. In every thoughtful decision Harry makes, every child he teaches to be brave, every quiet moment when he chooses compassion over impulse. That is the legacy Snape leaves behind. Not bitterness, not hatred, but a childhood rewritten, a future reclaimed, and a world saved by the unlikeliest family of all.
In the years that follow the war, life does not return to the way it was. Not for Harry, and certainly not for the wizarding world. Recovery is not a spell. It is not a potion. It is a long, uneven walk across ground still trembling from the aftermath of fear. But Harry begins that walk with something many survivors never have, a foundation built from years of discipline, emotional stability, and the relentless guidance of a man who prepared him for darkness long before anyone else admitted it was coming. In the early months after Voldemort's fall, Harry avoids the spotlight as though it were contagious. He attends memorials, yes. He gives statements, yes. But he does not bask in gratitude. He does not cling to praise. Instead, he observes. He thinks. He helps quietly, rebuilding alongside the countless witches and wizards who lost homes, families, expectations. And though he never admits it aloud, the reason he processes grief so evenly is because Snape taught him not to let emotion consume clarity. That does not mean he does not mourn. Some days he wakes and feels the loss of Snape like a physical shadow, an absence so loud it hums under his skin. Some days he sits in silence for hours, sorting memories the way Snape once sorted ingredients. And some days he gets angry, not at Snape, but at fate, at prophecy, at a world that demanded so much from two people who deserved gentler lives. On the day Hogwarts reopens its doors, Harry walks through its halls slowly, noticing changes others overlook. Students laugh again. Teachers smile again. Portraits gossip again. But beneath the surface lies a scar. Hogwarts is healing, but healing takes time. Minerva McGonagall, now headmistress, invites Harry to her office. She studies him quietly. "You remind me of him," she says at last. Harry's throat tightens. "I get told that more often now." "He shaped you," she continues, "far more than people realize." Harry nods. There is nothing to correct, nothing to add. In the years that follow, Harry chooses a path no one predicted. He does not become an Auror, though Kingsley offers him the prestigious position more than once. He does not join the ministry, or write a memoir, or pursue public admiration. Instead, he teaches. He returns to Hogwarts as a professor, not for glory, but for something far simpler: the desire to ensure no student grows up unprotected, misunderstood, or alone. The first time he stands before a class, wand in hand, he feels a flicker of déjà vu. His posture, his measured speaking style, even the dry humor slipping into his lectures, it all mirrors someone else. The students whisper. He's strict but fair. He expects a lot. He sees through every excuse. Harry smiles privately. He knows exactly where those habits came from. And some evenings, when the classroom's empty and the candles dim, Harry sits alone at his desk and lets memories wash over him. Not painfully, but softly. Snape correcting essays with unnecessary sharpness. Snape lecturing about the foolishness of improvisation. Snape making tea as though it were a defensive maneuver. Snape watching him across a cluttered room with the expression of a man who had accidentally grown a heart and didn't know what to do with it. Hogwarts becomes home again, but a different kind than before. Harry keeps Spinner's End as well. Not untouched, no shrine, but maintained, lived in, and respected. He repairs the bookshelves. He rewrites the wards. He brews tea in the same chipped mug Snape used for years. He sits by the window where Snape once corrected exams, and he reads quietly, letting the stillness settle like dust on old memories. Sometimes he speaks aloud, not expecting answers, not needing them. "I hope you'd be proud," he murmurs one afternoon, closing a volume on advanced counter-hex theory. The room remains silent, but Harry feels something shift. Not magic, not ghosts, just memory settling into place. Pride is not always spoken. Years pass. Hogwarts thrives. Students graduate, carrying not just spells, but resilience,
emotional intelligence, and the awareness that strength is not loud or showy. It is quiet, deliberate, and compassionate. They carry pieces of Harry's lessons, which themselves carry pieces of Snape's. Legacies rarely bloom cleanly. They grow through people, through choices, through the unseen influence of those who shaped us. And Snape, who spent his life believing himself a footnote in the world's story, becomes a chapter in Harry's, a foundational one. On the 20th anniversary of the Battle of Hogwarts, Harry stands before a small audience gathered beneath the repaired castle walls. He speaks softly, choosing each word with care, another habit inherited from Snape. He thanks the fallen, he honors the survivors, and then he adds something no one expects. "There was a man," he begins, "who taught me how to think before I act, who taught me strength without cruelty, discipline without punishment, and loyalty without conditions." The world.
They saw what he wanted them to see. But I saw the rest. The crowd listens, breath held. I would not be here today without him. I survived because he prepared me for a world that was not kind. And I lived because he taught me how to choose compassion even when anger felt easier. Harry pauses, voice soft but unwavering. His name was Severus Snape, and he was my family. The words do not echo magically, but they settle into stone, into hearts, into history. That night, Harry walks alone to the edge of the forbidden forest. The air smells of grass and rain. The stars gleam overhead like 1,000 tiny memories. "I'm still trying," he whispers, "every day." The wind shifts, cool and familiar. Not an answer, not a presence, but a reminder that love and influence never disappear. They imprint themselves onto the people we become. Harry turns, cloak brushing the ground, and walks back toward the castle, older, wiser, and unshakably himself. Not the chosen one, not the savior, not the boy in the cupboard. The child who grew up, the student who survived, the son Snape never expected, and the man Snape helped shape into something better than destiny predicted. Their story doesn't end with loss. It ends with legacy, with healing, with the quiet truth that even the darkest paths can create the brightest futures when someone chooses, against all odds, to care. And in that truth, Harry carries Snape with him, not as a wound, but as a light. Time moves forward in uneven steps, as it always does after great wars. Some years feel like entire lifetimes contained in a single breath. Others pass so gently, Harry barely notices them until he finds another gray hair in the mirror or another student calling him Professor Potter with awe that still startles him. Yet, through all of it, Snape's presence lingers. Not as a ghost, not as regret, but as a framework, a way of thinking, a way of living. Harry's adult life becomes a tapestry woven from choices shaped, directly and indirectly, by the man who raised him. When Harry becomes a parent, the change is subtle but profound. He holds his first child with a softness he once feared he would never be capable of. Ginny teases him gently about how cautiously he supports the infant's neck, how carefully he measures each movement, how he hovers just close enough to intervene at any sign of distress. But Ginny knows the truth. Harry grew up around a man who treated responsibility like ritual, a man who double-checked wards, measured risks, and softened his tone only when absolutely necessary. Harry's parenting reflects that same quiet vigilance, though with far more laughter and affection than Snape ever allowed himself. Still, on difficult days, or sleepless nights, or during the toddler phase when chaos seems coded into the very air, Harry sometimes catches himself speaking with Snape's cadence. Short, precise, oddly comforting. He smiles every time. His children grow up hearing stories about bravery, friendship, curiosity, and the importance of thinking before reacting. But they also grow up hearing about a man who was both strict and kind, brilliant and flawed, difficult and devoted. A man who saved their father's life in ways too complex for a bedtime story.
A man Harry will never allow the world to forget. Hogwarts, too, changes under Harry's influence. He integrates emotional literacy into the curriculum, not formally, but through the way he teaches. He listens to his students the way Snape rarely could, not because Snape lacked compassion, but because he lacked the examples Harry now provides. Harry trains them to defend themselves not out of fear, but out of respect for their own lives. He teaches them the difference between courage and impulsiveness. He teaches them how to read a room, how to steady their breath, how to survive the shadows as well as the light. These lessons are not written in textbooks, they are inherited. And the students, knowingly or not, become part of Snape's extended legacy. Some nights, after long days of grading essays or tutoring anxious first years through difficult spells, Harry walks the corridors alone. He pauses outside the old potions classroom. Sometimes he swears the dungeon air still carries faint sense of mugwort and frustration. He imagines Snape standing at the front of the room, cloak billowing unnecessarily, sarcasm fully weaponized. The memory makes him smile, every single time. On the 20th anniversary of Snape's death, Harry returns to Hogwarts at dusk. He walks the path to the lake. He carries a single lily. Not for symbolism, not for drama, simply because Snape loved Lily Evans enough to carry her memory through a lifetime of hardship. And Harry now carries both of them in ways neither could have predicted. He kneels by the water and speaks softly. Not to a ghost, not to the past, just to the quiet. "I hope I've done it right," he says. "I hope you'd think so." The reflection of the castle shimmers on the lake's surface, and for a moment, Harry feels what he always feels in these moments, not sorrow, but gratitude. Snape never gave him gentle love. He gave him structured love, protective love, honest love. Love shaped like long nights, difficult lessons, fierce loyalty, and impossible choices. Harry stands again, brushing dirt from his robes. The sky deepens overhead. Lanterns flicker to light along the castle walls. Students laugh in the distance. Life breathes onward. In the years that follow, Harry becomes a mentor not just to students, but to teachers, aurors, young parents, anyone who comes to him seeking guidance. He speaks with a steadiness that calms entire rooms. He gives advice rooted in harsh realities softened by compassion. And every so often, someone will tell him, "You're wise beyond your years." Harry only shakes his head. "Someone taught me well." He doesn't have to. Those who truly understand him already know. Decades later, when Harry is an old man, and Hogwarts has changed again and again around him, a student asks him a question that stops him mid-step. "Professor," she begins hesitantly, "who made you who you are?" Harry smiles, deeply, thoughtfully, a little sadly. "Many people," he says, "but one in particular." The student asks what he was like. Harry looks toward the dungeons as though expecting a familiar silhouette to turn the corner. And he answers with the soft certainty of someone who has carried a truth his whole
entire life. He was strict, Harry says, and complicated, and brave, and he saved more lives than anyone will ever truly know, including mine. The student nods, wide-eyed. Was he a hero? Harry considers this for a long moment. He remembers Spinner's End, dusty light across potion bottles, early mornings spent learning the difference between caution and fear, late nights with books spread across tables, the rare but unforgettable moments when Snape's voice softened by a fraction of an inch. Yes, Harry finally says, but not the kind people write stories about. He was the kind you become better because of. The student absorbs this, thoughtful. Harry continues walking, each step steady and slow. His joints ache a bit more these days, but his mind is sharp, his spirit even sharper. And somewhere, woven into his very being, is the imprint of a man who never believed he deserved to raise a child, yet did it anyway, with a devotion that changed the course of history. In the end, Harry realizes that the story of his childhood is not one of deprivation or prophecy or fame. It is the story of a boy who was taught to think, to observe, to survive,
to find compassion even in darkness. It is the story of a man who learned how to love without ever being taught. It is the story of two lives, rewritten not by magic, but by choice. And long after Harry's footsteps fade through the corridors of Hogwarts, long after new generations replace old ones, long after war becomes memory and memory becomes myth, the influence of Severus Snape lives on. In the students who think before they act, in the teachers who protect without hesitation, in the adults who raise children with patience and honesty, and in one man who grew from a frightened child into a steady, brilliant leader, because someone once looked at him and decided, against every instinct, to try. This is the childhood Harry never had, and the future he earned. Not because he was chosen, but because he was raised. And even as years stretch into decades, Harry often finds himself returning to the quiet truth that shaped him. Childhood is not defined by blood or prophecy or even circumstance. It is defined by who shows up, who stays, who teaches you not through perfection but through presence. Snape showed up. That alone changed everything. There comes a winter evening, late in Harry's life, when snow gathers on the Hogwarts grounds in soft, uneven drifts. Harry stands at the window of his quarters, watching students toss snowballs with poor aim and great enthusiasm. Their laughter rings over the courtyard, bright and untamed. He smiles faintly. Ginny has passed on some years ago. His children are grown, scattered across the world. His grandchildren visit often, filling his home with questions, stories, and joy that folds itself into the quiet spaces of his old age. Harry's body has slowed. His hands shake sometimes when he holds a cup of tea. But his mind remains steady, sharp enough to analyze, soft enough to understand, strong enough to remember without breaking. That night he feels drawn, as he sometimes does, to wander the castle. His footsteps echo through dim corridors lined with portraits that whisper greetings. The castle seems to breathe around him, old but vibrant, ancient but alive. He walks until he reaches the dungeons. The air is cool, familiar, weighted with memories he carries like threads woven into his bones. Harry stops outside the potions classroom. The door is slightly ajar. Of course it is. Things at Hogwarts tend to behave according to memory as much as magic. He steps inside. The benches are newer now, the cauldrons shinier, the shelves more organized. But under it all lies the faint outline of what once was. He can almost see Snape standing at the front, arms crossed, robes billowing for dramatic effect. He can almost hear the pointed remarks, the sighs of exaggerated disappointment masking reluctant pride. Harry chuckles quietly. He finds a seat in the front row and lowers himself into it slowly. The wood creaks under his weight, not unkindly, just acknowledging age. "You know," he murmurs to the empty room, "you terrified half the school, and I think you enjoyed it." Silence answers, but Harry continues anyway. "I used to wonder if you regretted it, any of it. The choices, the sacrifices, the raising me, everything." He sighs, long and soft. "But then I realized something. Regret is a luxury for people who had better options. You did what you could, more than you should have had to." He pauses. "And I turned out all right, didn't I?" A faint breeze stirs the pages of a book on the desk. Probably the draft. Probably. But Harry smiles as if it were acknowledgement. Eventually he stands. His bones protest, but he steadies himself with the desk. He walks toward the shelves, fingertips brushing the spines of old textbooks, feeling the imprint of years upon them. "Thank you," he says simply. The words do not echo. They settle into the air as gently as dust, joining countless unspoken truths that hang between memory and presence. Harry leaves the dungeon, closing the door behind him with a soft click. Outside the classroom, he notices a student lingering near the stairwell, a first-year girl with dark hair, clutching a book so tightly it might protest. She looks nervous, lost. Harry's gaze softens instinctively. "Problem?" he asks kindly. She startles, then stammers, I can't find the library." Harry smiles. "Ah, an academic soul. Follow me." As they walk, she begins asking questions. How to manage classes, which professors to trust, whether Hogwarts ever stops feeling enormous.
Harry answers with the warmth of someone who remembers being small, overwhelmed, and searching for steady ground. When they reach the library doors, she hesitates. "Professor Potter?" "Yes." "How did you know how to find me? I mean, how did you know I needed help?" Harry considers this. Outside, snow begins to fall in slow spirals. "Someone taught me," he replies gently, "to pay attention." She nods, though she doesn't fully understand. Not yet. She will, years later perhaps, after she has grown into herself. After she has learned that kindness can come from strange places and lessons from unexpected teachers. Harry watches her disappear between the shelves, then begins his slow walk back toward his rooms. The castle is quiet, peaceful, familiar. Every corridor hums with the echo of footsteps no longer present. Every torch flickers with shadows shaped like memory. And Harry feels something warm settle inside him. Not nostalgia, not grief, continuity, legacy. A sense that stories do not end. They ripple outward, shaping lives long after the last chapter has closed. In his chambers, he sits at his desk and begins writing a letter. To no one, to everyone, to the future. To the students who feel unseen, he writes, "There is more strength in you than you realize. Look for those who challenge you to grow, even when their words are sharp.
They may be carving a safer path for you than you can yet understand. To the ones who carry anger, know this: anger is not weakness, but it needs direction. Find something worth protecting and it will guide you. To the ones who carry grief, know this: love leaves echoes. They are not chains, they are torches. And to the ones who feel alone, remember, family is not only blood. Sometimes it is the hand that steadies you when the world breaks open." He pauses, tapping his quill, then writes one final line. "He saved me long before I ever saved anyone else." Harry sets down the quill, closes the letter, breathes. Later that night, as he settles into bed, the castle creaks, a familiar, comforting sound. Not a message, not a ghost, just Hogwarts being Hogwarts. But Harry closes his eyes and imagines, just for a moment, that somewhere in the quiet a dry voice mutters, "Sentimental nonsense." Harry smiles. "Good night, Professor." And sleep takes him gently, as snow continues falling outside, covering the world in white, a fresh beginning draped over an old, enduring story. In the end, Harry Potter does not become defined by prophecy, by trauma, or even by victory. He becomes defined by the childhood he rebuilt, piece by painstaking piece, under the care of a man who was never meant to raise him, but did so with fierce, imperfect devotion. A man who shaped him not into a hero, but into someone capable of choosing his own path. A man whose influence did not end with death. Because when love is forged in courage, sacrifice, and quiet persistence, it leaves a mark no darkness can erase. And that, above all else, is the childhood Harry never had, and the life he built from it.